Well, I was here, I think back in April, we went through the Real ID Act, and we went through the law on that, and had a pretty good time exposing what's all in that. And tonight, I want to send you folks home with some, just some forms you can use as basic self-defense for some little incidents you might get into. A little bit of prevention might cost you $10,000 in lawyer fees. So we're going to go through that. But the part before that, we want to go through why we're in the situation we're in. How we got here. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit how we can get out of it. And really the theme tonight is going from, that's a lousy color. We want to go from defense to offense. Because we've all been pretty much raised to be defensive people. We get forms all our life, we fill them out, sign them, never ask a question. And we've been trained to do that over the years without question. We're going to go into that a little bit, how we got trained in that, and what we need to do to get out of it. Now, the main reason all of us went to school. We went through a school system, and you might have been private school, parochial school, or the government school. But they're really all three of them are the same system. And they have priorities in this educational system. Now, you're getting an education was about a third priority. That you went to school and got trained and got educated. The second most important priority was, I think it's the NEA's retirement program. That's the second most important thing about the school system. But the most important thing about the school system is that it's actually a behavior modification program. When you come out of school after 12 years, you've been trained to think and act in a predictable manner. And the government knows what they can do to you and how far they can push you. And when you came out of school, we're mostly like this. We're defensive. We're reactionary. And pretty passive. That's kind of where they want us. And if you want to see something that's different than us, just look at the founders of this country. These guys got together. They said, they've been meeting. They said, we're going to start a country. We're going to run it without a king. We're going to do something that nobody's done before, and we can do this. We know how to do it. We know who we are, and we can back it up. We're going to do this, and so we're going to have a country with a minimum of government and a maximum of freedom. Something that hadn't been done since Israel under the judges, 3,000 years ago. And these guys were big enough to do it because they didn't go through the same school system we went to. These were what we call big boys. Nobody told Sam Houston he couldn't go down to Texas and start a new country. He just went and did it. You look at guys like Andrew Jackson, or how do you think Teddy Roosevelt would handle TSA today? If he saw an 80-year-old lady getting pulled out of a wheelchair so she'd get the wand treatment, what would Teddy do about that? Suppose there'd be a few less federal pensions to pay out? These guys did not stand for that. And we don't have to go back that far. Just look up some history on the World War II commanders we had. Now, we all know about George Patton. And, Patton and the Third Army and what he did. You look up guys like Chester Nimitz, Bull Halsey, Herman Hannikin, Smedley Butler, Lew Walt, Chesty Puller. These guys did not have losing in their vocabulary. They didn't know what it meant. There was no second place to these guys. There was win or die, and that was it. Some of you guys have probably heard of Merrill's Marauders in Burma. There's this guy named, I think Frank Merrill was his name. They field promoted him to brigadier general and gave him a regiment to clear out the Japanese on the Burma Trail. He had a couple of Chinese battalions with him, and he had 3,000 Americans in this regiment. So they did this 5-month campaign. They ran the Japanese out. When he was done, he had 130 guys who could walk. That was it. They didn't tell the American public that because they were afraid the casualties would be too high. They wouldn't accept it. But these guys could not take defeat for an answer. And he pushed his guys. When he was done, he had 130 guys who could walk. Some were wounded yet, but that's how many could walk out of 3,000. The rest were dead, wounded, or sick and had to be evacuated. But that was it when his campaign was done. And there's a difference. If we have officers like that in the military, they get run out. Stanley McChrystal, John Singlaub, back in the 80s when he questioned Carter, if you remember him. When you get real commanders, they get run out. And so there's a difference between us and them today. You imagine Al Capone putting up with TSA. It just won't happen. Him and the boys would visit these guys at night, But we don't have to do that, We have to use our heads. We have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And like Al Capone said back in the 30s or the 20s, we need to quit being afraid of the government and we need to become the government. And they are in Chicago today. So we need to do what Big Al said, and we need to kind of move into that arena a little bit. So we haven't gone into that very much, but we're starting to move in that direction where we can have some good research behind us and some good basis for it. And I want to tell you, there's more law for you than against you. You just don't know it yet. But if you know what you're doing, it's almost, to enforce a law on you, they almost have to break 3 or 4 laws to do it. But you got to catch them doing it. Because this is a country where the people are the masters and your servants are truly the servants. I think this is about the only country in the world where we have public servants. And so it truly means. Britain doesn't have public servants. France, Europe. These guys are your masters. They're appointed, and they are not servants. They're over you. But in America, the servants are under you, and the courts will tell you that over and over again. And we'll look at a few of them. What we want to get to, the opposite of this, we want to get, offensive, rational, and proactive. We don't want to wait around for something to happen to us. We'd rather make it happen. If you wait around for something to happen, it's always going to be bad. Remember, defense is the same as defeat. You can't win a war playing defense. Defense eventually leads to defeat. You can't make it. The Japanese lost in the Pacific because they started playing defense. Germany lost because they started playing defense. Any football team that just plays defense loses. You don't make any touchdowns playing defense. You got to play offense. It doesn't come natural. It takes that energy. Freedom is not a natural state. Freedom takes eternal vigilance and energy, just like creating a light bulb. Darkness is natural. Light has to take energy, and it's created by people. So freedom doesn't happen by accident, but slavery always does. Slavery is a natural state. Just read history. So I want to go back and kind of how did we get here, and how do we get out? So we got to take a little mind trip to understand how this all happened. We're going to go back in time. I want you guys to all go back to school, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade. Can you? What's that, Taylor?
The toughest 15 years of my life.
We're in trouble. Go back to, you're in 2nd grade in school. You're in 3rd grade in school. Remember that? You know, the school, the smell, everything else. But it's a setting like this. You know, you're out in your low chairs and your desks, and there's up in the front of the room. There's a desk up here, and behind that desk there's somebody sitting there. It doesn't matter who it is. It's the position. The person behind that desk can reward you or punish you, can commend you or criticize you, can curse you or bless you. And that pattern, and they have that in school because that pattern, that's your pattern for life. Every major decision that you've gone through or participated in is you, a desk, and somebody behind it. Now, if you know what you're doing, you can reverse the roles on it. If you know how to ask some questions, we've done that. And it's great watching that. But primarily your life, all the major decisions, when you got a marriage license, when you got a car loan, when you went to court, when you saw your probation officer, you know, all these kind of things, that person behind the desk has the power to reward you or punish you. And you accept it as law. And we have a system of governance now where the lowest bureaucrat is your lawmaker. You accept what they say almost without question. We've never been taught to question what they say. We never had the information. We didn't know where to look. And of course, it was never encouraged. And so they rule us through these people that we call bureaucrats. You ever heard that term? That's not right. Just checking. Bureaucrat means the desk ruler. Means desk ruler. Bureau is French word for desk, and crat is just king or ruler. Just means desk ruler. The guy who rules the desk rules. We've gone from divine right of kings to divine right of bureaucrats. They run this country. Your legislators don't run this country. I mean, that's why they tell you to write a letter to your congressman. It doesn't make any sense. It makes a lot more sense to sue the bureaucrat. You know, start a rights violation against them. Don't worry about your congressman. He can't help you. When the IRS is knock on your door, write your senator. You know, it doesn't help. It's because your legislator is in the legislative branch of the government. Everybody else, the enforcers, are in the executive branch. The legislator can't do a thing about it. He might call and say something, but as soon as he hangs up the phone, you know, that revenue director just laughs, you know. 4 years he'll be gone. 20 years from now, I'll still be here. That's how the country's run. That's just reality, and we've overlooked it, and here it is, and now we're suffering for it. But the bureaucrats, you know, rule as law, and you know this sticks with you. It takes some initiative to break out of this system that we're stuck into, and it works great for the rulers. Remember in the old days, they went to the temple and they would bring a sacrifice. They would lay it on the altar, and if the high priest accepted it, you would be blessed. And if he rejected it, well, you had to get another sacrifice. Today we go to the courthouse and we bring a check or money, the sacrifice. We lay it on the desk or counter, the altar, and the bureaucrat, if he accepts it, lets us keep our property for another year. We're stuck in the same old religious system that Cain and Nimrod started back in time. Mm-hmm. Some people call it the Mystery Babylon religion, where you pay a huge amount of your life, a portion of it, in the form of money, you trade your time for money, to support gods that don't exist. Albany County is a legal fiction. State of Wyoming is a legal fiction. City of Laramie is a legal fiction. It exists in a manila envelope in the Secretary of State's office. But it doesn't exist in substance. It doesn't know who you are. It can't identify you. You have to go in and tell it who you are. These legal fictions can't see you. That's why when you get a driver's license or something, you always have to check a little box if you're a boy or girl, because they don't know. Nobody here has that problem, but Bank of America can't tell. The state of Wyoming can't tell if you're a boy or a girl until you tell it. It's a false god. So it's just another religious system we're stuck in. In the old days, they called it the religious system or the high priest system. Today, we call it civil government. Same thing, just different name. But you could call it a civil religious system because we all believe in it. You sign oaths every year under penalties of perjury saying you believe the state of Wyoming exists when you get a driver's license. You swear that all the information is true under penalties of perjury, and away you go. You get your license. And you just told them, again, that I believe you exist. If we all quit believing, it would disappear. But the state of Wyoming exists only because of your name on a contract. Okay, it exists by contract. You got a marriage license, got a birth certificate, you got a driver's license, you sign up for a property tax exemption. When you sign that contract, the state is obligated to enforce it. No contracts, no state. That's why Jesus said in the Bible, swear not at all. He wasn't talking about using bad words, he said don't swear any oaths. Because these oaths get you into jurisdictions that, well, you're stuck in it now. So we're always kind of stuck in a religious system. And few people want to go into that. I'm kind of a nutcase, so I'm going to go into that because that's really how we operate. But so we're making these sacrifices all the time, and so the question is, here we are. We're in this. How do we get out of it? I mean, there's always a way out. I got this email from a guy a couple of years ago, a friend of mine. And it's one of my favorite stories. I really like it. It's short. There's a Marine pilot flying over Iraq. And the Iranian air defense radar said, "Unknown aircraft, you are in Iranian airspace. Identify yourself." Aircraft said, "This is a United States aircraft. I am in Iraqi airspace." Iranian air defense says, "You are in Iranian airspace. If you do not depart our airspace, we will launch interceptor aircraft." Aircraft responds, "This is a Marine Corps FA-18 fighter. Send him up. I'll wait." Now, some people debate whether the story is true, but I did a hitch in the Marine Corps, and believe me, this is pretty normal conversation. And if you're going to be a Marine pilot, you have to be like that. You're not going to get any other way. Guys join the Air Force to fly a fancy plane and tell their friends about it. Guys join the Marine Air Wing to fly a fancy airplane and shoot somebody down with it and then tell somebody about it. They want to use it. But the speech says a lot, what he has in there. Send him up, I'll wait. He can say that because of the training he's had. He's gone through it. He knows his aircraft. He knows himself. He knows what he can do. He knows everything about it. He also knows the enemy. He knows the training they've had, what they can do, and he knows he can beat them. He can probably take on 3 or 4 Iranians at one time and not worry too much. But it's because of his training he can say that. If he wasn't trained, he couldn't say anything like that. But he's ready to go. He's ready to fight. He's ready to make some kills, and he wants to do it because he knows he can do it. So I like that phrase, send him up, I'll wait. Kind of sounds like Jesus talking. You can just hear Jesus. He's at Mary and Martha's taking a day off, and some runner comes up from Jerusalem. And he says, "Hey, Jesus, the Pharisees are really upset about what you said in the temple last week. They're going to send some guys over and talk to you." And Jesus says, "Well, send them over. I'll wait." He wasn't afraid of any debate. Or the next week he says, "Well, Jesus, you really beat the Pharisees up pretty bad last week. They're going to send the Herodians and Sadducees over and teach you a lesson, I guess." Jesus said, "Well, send them over. I'll wait." He's not going anywhere. He can handle these guys. Next week, maybe the guy says, "Well, boy, you really clean your clocks. They're going to they might send the captain of the guard over to arrest you." And Jesus says, "Well, send them over. I'll wait. I can handle these guys." He's the exact opposite of us, but that's what we should strive to be, and what he was able to do there. But he never ducked a confrontation. So let's say it's next Monday morning and the phone rings, and Penny answers the phone, and he says, "Is this Penny Esplin?" She says, "Oh, yes, it is." "Well, this is Jack Williams from the IRS, special agent. We'd like to talk to you about some activities that you've been involved in that we don't think you're reporting on. And we're going to send a couple of special agents to come over and talk to you." Penny says, "Well, send them over. I'll wait." Penny's been trained to handle that. Or Carl here, he gets a call, and it's Department of Family Services, and we've had reports about you spanking your grandchildren, abusing them. We're going to send a couple associates over and talk to you. Carl says, "Send them over. I'll wait."
He already did.
If you can say that.
I didn't hear him.
But you can do that. It's not that hard. There's a lot of good information out there. It takes a little bit of time each week, but a little bit of homework on your part in a couple of years, you'd be able to do that. It's not that difficult. There's more for you than against you. And I'd encourage you to go that way, and we can talk more on that, on how to go further into this. But having that training and confidence to be able to say something like that. Department of Family Services want to talk to me. I'd say, "Well, send them over. I need the money, Because when they come over, you're going to go into offensive mode, and you're going to do what they do. You're going to be over there with a couple of friends with notebooks, and you're going to be gathering evidence for rights violations, due process violations, trespass, and anything else you can think of. A lot of your problems will be solved by a couple of friends with a notebook, taking notes. But you can turn the tables on them. You can replace the guy behind the desk with yourself, where he's answering the questions. Remember, when you're asking questions, you're on offense. When you're answering, you're always on defense. You can't win answering questions, because everything you say can and will be used against you. It's never for you. The policeman on the witness stand will never say anything good about you. They're trained not to. They will only say things against you. That's what they mean when they say that. Or the agent or the family social worker, whatever. They will not say anything good about you, even if you have a good conversation. You go, "Wow, that was really good." And all of a sudden you're being set up on charges. And you got to hire a lawyer for $30,000 to get you out of it. So there's a great video everybody should watch. It's on YouTube. And I'm not hardcore against police. I get along with them and like them and stuff. They got a hard job too. But there's certain lines I won't cross with them. But the name of this YouTube is Why You Should Never Talk to the Police. It's about 27 minutes long by a great talking lawyer out of Virginia. It's well worth your time to watch. Because right after him, there's a guy following him from, he's an investigative detective, and he talks after this lawyer, and he'll tell you, he affirms what the lawyer says. If you talk to the police, you will go down. But it's a great YouTube to watch. It's very good basic training on how to keep your mouth shut. if you're ever in a jam where it might be fines or imprisonment or taking a property and stuff like that, would you punish me for exercising my right to remain silent? Good question to ask them. You need to ask questions. Would you violate your oath in front of these witnesses by compelling me to give you evidence that you intend on using against you? That you intend on using against me? You train yourself to bring up these things and to use them. And save you a lot of time and money in the end. So, what's this look like in real life? How does this work? I can tell you a lot of stories, but I'll just give you a couple. How it works on the ground, on your feet. I was working with a guy about 10 years ago. He was a septic installer. We were out east of town. He's putting in a septic system on a lot that was 100 feet wide. Now, this lot was grandfathered in because they had just made new legislation saying you had to be 100 feet from any boundary. So he was only 50, but he was grandfathered in. Now, I was working out there. He was digging it in. I was doing some electrical to hook up the pumps. I had to go to town to get some parts. While I was gone, the county inspector had come out and shut his job down. Told him it was illegal. He couldn't do that. So I went back out there, and he was, just in an uproar because he couldn't finish this job. I said, well, let's go back to the courthouse. Let's drive down there and see if there's anybody around to talk to. So we drove back down to the courthouse here, and the inspector at that time was a young lady at the courthouse here. Some of you might remember her, Michelle Jones or something. I think that was her name. She ran for office a couple times. But we went up to her office, and she was there. And this guy was with me, and I just asked her, did you shut this job down that this man here was doing out there east of town? She says, yeah, I did. I said, what authority did you have to do that? Can you give us your statutory authority for how you did that? Did you not violate due process by doing that? Did you give him a hearing by shutting his job down? Because when you shut a job down, it's a tort. And you have to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, and you get a hearing before they can take something away from you. When they're going to take your driver's license away, there's always a hearing to make sure that they followed the law in doing it. So you can't just get red tagged for a job. They do it, but you got to challenge it. So I asked this girl about 3 or 4 questions, and she ran in the back office and closed the door. That was it. So we wandered around the courthouse. There wasn't anybody else around. So I told this guy, well, let's come back tomorrow morning. We'll go and talk to somebody here then. So next morning, I had an emergency in Centennial. I had to go out there and take care of it. So I called this guy up, and this guy was quick. He was a strong guy, mentally and physically, and he didn't need a whole lot of coaching. I said, just go down there and just find some people and just say stuff like, there's a due process violation, Administrative Procedures Act, how much authority did you have to do this, and all this. So he went to the courthouse about 11 o'clock. He ran into Pat Gabriel here, and he beat on Pat a little bit, and Pat just ran down the hall. He left. So he went up to the county attorney's office. It was Cal Ruka at the time, and he talked to Cal for about 3 minutes about this and this language, and Cal got it. He understood what was going on. He went down to the inspector's office, and he told the girl down there, look, you have the authority to inspect and nothing else. You cannot shut a job down. The only thing you can do is inspect a job and write your reports. You have no more authority than that. Then he took the guy down. He found Pat Gabriel, and he grabbed Pat and he said, you got your checkbook with you? Why don't you start writing this guy checks? Don't you know what he's going to do to you? Here, pull out a check and write him a check for 10 grand. And Gabriel just ran out. And 1 o'clock, this guy was back on his backhoe, and he finished his job up. It's because we're about to take no for an answer. We knew who we are. We're going to go to the wall with this. And so we went after everybody involved and found out that they had no authority. Now, I had known this about inspectors for quite a while, that they really do not have authority to shut a job down. When your job is shut down, let's say you have even if you don't have, it's different if you have a building permit and if you don't. If you don't have a building permit and they try to shut your job down, it's trespass. If they try to shut your job down, it's a taking, okay? It's a tort. And the state or the county cannot do a taking on you without a hearing, which is under the Administrative Procedures Act. You get to have a hearing before they can enforce this on you. But if you don't know that, they're going to do it on you. But you have to know that. I was at a contractors meeting here in Laramie back in the late 90s. There was a bunch of us there with the city inspectors. And of course, the city attorney wasn't there. They never show up. But the meeting was getting kind of slow, you know, it wasn't much conversation, or it was getting kind of boring, so I just, Jerry Hankin was there, and I just said, you know, building permit is not for you to get permission to build a building. A building permit is you only get a building permit so the city can trespass on your property without you charging for it. That's what the building permit's for. You actually don't need a building permit to put up a building on your property. The permit is to allow city or county officials to come on your land without being charged with trespass. Jerry Hankin said, yeah, that's right. They'd been told that by the city attorney, but they're not going to tell you. So, law is always logical, but it's the people who try to get in the way and cloud it up a little bit. So, time is it? I got a brother down in Denver. He used to work for DIA. He'd worked there for 12 years. And those little ticket machines that you park your car with. You get a ticket, then you go out and you pay it with a credit card and you leave. My brother had worked down there for 12 years. And he worked for a company. Now, DIA is owned by the city of Denver. They own that down there. But he worked for a company that was a contractor there, and were not part of DIA. And he ran this little setup here, and there's this lady who ran the airport who always hated my brother. Had tried to get rid of him for years because he just wouldn't go along with the usual political talk. We get this job done in 30 days. My brother would say, oh, it's going to take 90 days. Nobody's even started digging. But anyway, she hated him. I was at his house one day and asked him what he's doing. Oh, I got fired, you know. Oh, wow, how'd that happen? About a month before, he had written a letter to the mayor of Denver and talked about all the security lapses in the payment system of these credit cards. Very vulnerable system. He wrote the letter to the mayor, explaining it all, and how vulnerable everybody's credit cards were. They published his letter on the front page of the Denver paper, the Denver Post, back in February of 2006. So 2 weeks later, he got fired. 2 weeks after that, there was a big theft of credit card information at the airport. Guess who got fingered? My brother. Now this is serious stuff. 500,000 credit cards. The information was hijacked. So he's got no place to go. He lived in a little town out by Lochbuie, somewhere there. So he's not going anywhere. So one day there's a knock on the door, and it's the city police from Denver. You know, it's Denver property, so they came out to talk to him. And I tried to get him to come here. It's a lot funnier when he tells it because he was there. Anyway, these guys come up, and they all look like CSI guys, haircuts and all that, you know, just like on the TV show. So he started playing around with them. They wanted to ask him questions. And he said, you guys don't have anything. You know who did it. I know who did it. If you guys really get something, come out and talk to me or send me a letter and I'll read it, you know. And there's this thing in these TV shows, I guess. It's called a tell. It's when, I guess, if a cop is asking you a question and you answer it and look to your left, you're lying. Or you're not telling the truth. So my brother started doing that with him. Then he finally said, pretty good tell, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. So he laughed him off the yard. Never heard from him again. Then the Secret Service got into it. And the head of the Secret Service down there was a guy named Tracy Dick. It wasn't Dick Tracy, it was Tracy Dick. At least that was the name he used, okay? And he called my brother up, wanted him to come down and talk. My brother said, no, I'm not going to come down to your office and talk. You guys don't have anything on me. You guys don't have any proof. But if you want to talk, we'll meet in a restaurant somewhere, or we'll meet in a lawyer's office somewhere. But I'm not coming down there and talk to you. So they went through the neighborhood with a big dossier on him, and they're showing his neighbors, you know. My brother used to work for E-Systems. He had a real high security clearance. They had piles of stuff in there. Going around his neighborhood, telling what a bad guy he was, you know, this guy's going down, you know, and all that. So my brother would call him back up, and he said, you know, how'd you like it if I went around your neighborhood and did that, you know, and I know where you live, you know, I got you down. I can go through your neighborhood and do the same thing, you know. Maybe I should talk to your pastor or your mother-in-law and tell her what kind of a guy you are, you know. And my brother would just get on him like that. I told him to keep calling him about twice a week. Just tell him that you want to meet with him, you want to ask him some questions. You got a bunch of guys that you're going to ask him questions to. You're going to do it with witnesses. Now, I had lined up 3 guys in Denver who had said they would come with us if we had a meeting with these Secret Service guys. And my brother kept on him, called him twice a week. Hey, we want to have a meeting. We want to talk to you guys, you know. Why don't you guys call us up? Why don't you set up a meeting? And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. They quit calling. That's been 6 years ago. He's never heard from them. What generally happens in a case like this, you know, you got to go out. Most people will go out. Oh man, the Secret Service is after me, so they go out and get a lawyer. The lawyer will go out, put a $40,000 lien on your property. He'll start taking your case. He's going to start taking statements from you, depositions. He's going to meet with the Secret Service, and they're going to take your statements, move a few phrases around. By the time they get done, you're going to believe you're guilty. And they're going to do a plea bargain for you, 3 years instead of 10. And this is the norm for a lot of people. They go to prison for 3 years, they come out a felon, and they don't know why it happened. They don't know how it happened. But you can get in a situation like that, and all of a sudden you're looking at going to jail for a year or two and coming out a felon. And you didn't do a thing wrong. But if you start answering questions, that's where you go. You got to be tough and ask these questions on these guys, because there's more for you than against you, and it's out there. Okay. I'm out of time for war stories. Well, I want to. I said I'd hand out some forms that are some basic self-defense, and everybody should have one of these in their house. It's called a Public Servants Questionnaire. You can pass those around, Harold, or something. Public Servants Questionnaire is a form that's authorized by Congress back in 1974 with the Privacy Act. And people were concerned about all these forms they're filling out, so Congress said, look, we'll make a Public Servants Questionnaire for you. When somebody comes to your door, they can fill out all this information. If they don't want to fill it out, you don't have to talk to them. And I like this form here because it's got all the law on it. You can look up the law. It's on Title 5, Section 552A. And this section here is mostly subsection E when you get the form. It's a little bit confusing if you want to look that up, because a lot of people look up 552, then they go to subsection A. But if you go to the statutes, it's 552A. It's in the first line. It's a little bit confusing. Then you have all your subsections, A, B, C, D, E. And this Public Servants Questionnaire is mostly in 552E. They got all these questions and the law that authorizes you to ask these questions. We've used it a couple times on census workers just for fun, and they get mad. And a cop came one time to a friend's door, and we handed it to him, and he got mad and left. And it's your right to do that. You can do it. You can do it with Department of Family Services, IRS, anybody. But you should have these in your home. It's just the times we live in. Sam Houston didn't have to do this. Your great-grandpa didn't have to do this. But we kind of do. These are the times we live in. Sometimes we do houses, we wire a house or remodel a house without a permit, because it would cost too much to go to the city for it. So sometimes I'll tell the owner, now don't rat on us if the city comes. Just give them this clipboard. It's got the public servants questionnaire on it. And Hale versus Hinkle, it's an old case. Just give them that. And then, now Hale versus Hinkle is a case that's never been overturned. A 1903 case that's been reaffirmed by the courts, I think, 1,700 times. By the Supreme Court and appellate courts. It hasn't changed. It says the individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He's entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no duty to the state or to his neighbors to divulge his business or to open his doors to an investigation so far as it may tend to incriminate him. He owes no such duty to the state since he receives nothing therefrom beyond the protection of his life and property. His rights are such as existed by the law of the land long antecedent to the organization of the state and can only be taken from him by due process of law and in accordance with the Constitution. Among his rights are a refusal to incriminate himself and the immunity of himself and his property from arrest or seizure except under a warrant of the law. He owes nothing to the public so long as he does not trespass upon their rights. Never been overturned. You can look this up. It's a long case. Hey, wants to email it, and I'll email you these pages. Just these pertinent pages on that. That was the Public Servants Questionnaire. Another thing is Public Records Act requests. Now, Public Records Act requests are great little weapons. I've got an example of one here, and there's nothing magic about them. It's just that you're going to go ahead and do it. And when you submit the Public Records Act request with your questions, they're supposed to answer it. So sometimes, once in a while, I'll get a speeding ticket, and I'm not too happy about it. So I'll pay the ticket, then I'll submit a Public Records Act request because they got to earn it. I want them to spend a couple hours researching these questions. So if I got to pay $80 for a ticket, they can spend a little time earning it. I shouldn't give it to them free. But I can pass this around. And like I said, these forms are nothing magic. But it's what you've done. Instead of waiting for something to happen to you, you're making something happen to them. And these little requests, under an organized, if you had 4 or 5 people organized to do these together, you get a lot of information out of the city that they really don't want. And sometimes they'll refuse to answer them, which brings you to the next level. Why won't you answer these questions? What are you hiding? Surely you don't have anything to hide. I started doing this about 6 years ago. I bought this DVD set. It's How to Use Public Records Act Requests. It's about a 3-hour session. You got the basic templates. It's called How to Dig Up Dirt on Public Officials. So you're probably not interested in that, are you? But it's like all things. I don't get very far on some things. I just run out of time trying to run a business and get involved in other things and doing other projects that are more pertinent sometimes than my own. But these are examples of just a simple Public Records Act request. I sent one to the Department of Transportation last January over my son's attempt to get a driver's license. And every state under the Real ID Act is allowed to have an exceptions process if you don't have primary documents. If you don't have a birth certificate or passport, the state has an exceptions process for people to provide alternative documents to get your driver's license. And the state of Wyoming does have that. So I wrote a Public Records Act request asking for that exceptions process, how they ran it, and who was on the board. Now, they didn't send it to me. They did send me their rules on everything. But I didn't get this exceptions process yet. But that doesn't mean it's over. See, the beauty of a Public Records Act request is it's over when I say it's over. Now, I sent this letter in January, so they figure I'm not going to do anything. But I can send a letter in September and ask for it again and demand it. And now they got to deal with it again. See, the beauty of Public Records Act requests is, you hate getting those letters from the county, the bills, the water bills, and all that stuff. You can set it up where they hate getting those letters from you. Okay? And that's what we ought to be doing a little bit. But there's just a simple Public Records Act request, just an example of them. But the thing is, you can do it on your own timetable. See, when you pay the speeding ticket, they're done with you. But that doesn't mean you're done with them.
You can encourage the officer not to give you the speeding ticket.
Yeah, you can do that
I was
too.
doing about 88, headed to Casper here a couple of weeks ago, so when I get pulled over, he walks up, he says, "You in a hurry today, huh?" No, not particularly. Well, I think you were speeding. I neither admit nor deny, officer, and I leave you to your strictest proofs.
What was that, Taylor?
I neither admit nor deny, and I leave you to your strictest proofs. Lawyer. No, I'm not a lawyer, common law citizen. So I get a warning. Think about slowing down, you're going a little fast. It says UD UCC 1-207 on my signature on my driver's license.
Uh-huh.
So it means that my driver's license is a license of convenience, but I retain my common law citizen rights. So I've not entered into a contract with the state of Wyoming. Another time I got a parking ticket for parking on the sidewalk in Cheyenne. So I go to traffic court, sign in, sign my name, show my ticket. So I'm sitting in the court kind of like this, waiting on the judge to come in. The clerk and the bailiff come in and say, "Who's Taylor Haynes? You're not supposed to be here, your ticket was a mistake, the judge tore it up. We need you to leave." That's the truth. So, if you do what he says, you win. And I was never, ever rude or
No.
smart aleck. Never do that. So it's just like he's telling you straight.
I hate to tell you this. Maybe you'll do it, but I was driving with my family down in Colorado a couple of years ago, and a patrolman pulled me over and down in Colorado, and said, "What's your big hurry?" I said, "Well, that's what life is about." So he wrote me a warning, I just couldn't think of anything else to say, and that just came out, And so we got to my friend's house. He said, "Man, did you show him your insurance?" "Oh, no." "Did you show him your registration?" "Oh, well, my insurance, I didn't have an insurance card with me. But I've got insurance." But it's a man, they've been pounding cars that don't have insurance cards, So, and about 2 months ago, I was driving up from 287. Now, I can't think what I told the guy. But anyway, I won't. I can't remember what I said, so I don't want to drag it out. But as Dr. Haynes said, it's out there. The procedure is there. And there's more law for you than there is against you. What I want to do, before I run out of time here, is just to show you what they didn't tell us in school a little bit here. the courts are always trying to encourage us to take our rightful status. Now, there's some pretty good cases here, and I'm going to pass these court cases out so you all have a copy. And with these court cases, you can formulate questions if you're having trouble with somebody and use these authorities on them. But I like using court cases as authorities. Occasionally, I'll write a letter to the editor, and I'll put a court case at the end for an authority on it. So it's not just me talking, it's the courts. I'm going to read you 3 quick quotes here. This is Federal Crop Insurance versus Merrill. Whatever the form in which the government functions, anyone entering into any agreement with the government takes the risk of having accurately ascertained that he who purports to act for the government stays within the bounds of his authority. And this is so even though the agent himself may have been unaware of the limitations upon his authority. Persons dealing with the government are charged with knowing government statutes and regulations, and they assume the risk that government agents may exceed their authority and provide misinformation. Another court ruling is, all persons in the United States are chargeable with knowledge of the statutes at large. It is well established that anyone who deals with the government assumes the risk that the agent acting in the government's behalf has exceeded the bounds of his authority. Even the courts are telling us, the agent's going to exceed the bounds of his authority. Expect it. And they're also telling us, they didn't tell you this in school. The courts are telling you, you're supposed to know all the rules and regulations. You thought the bureaucrat knew that. Why is the court telling you you're responsible to know all the rules and regulations? Because in this country, you're the master. The master is responsible for knowing the rules. The servants aren't responsible for any rules. They're only there to break them. But the master of the house is supposed to keep the servants in line. The ship captain must keep the sailors in line. The sailors don't have to stay in line. It's their job to break the rules. But you can bet the Commodore knows the rules and there's discipline. And the judge is telling us we are the ones who are to be the discipliners. And we are the masters in this country. We're supposed to know. Now we're saying, well, man, how do you know all that stuff? How are we supposed to know it all? It's not that hard because we only deal in specific areas. Maybe you want to know about property rights. It's not that hard. If you do a little bit of reading, if you did 6 or 8 hours of reading on the internet about property rights, you'll know more than anybody in Wyoming. Just about. Probably only a few lawyers would know more than you. But nobody sitting behind a desk in this courthouse is going to know more than you. And you can, use that on them. Now, I would like you guys to have these, a copy of these, if you want to pick one up on your way out. Now, notices are an old tool that a lot of people have used. Back in the 80s, a lot of guys, it was real popular, they would make up just a Fourth Amendment notice. They'd write, this is the Fourth Amendment of the United States, and you're responsible for knowing this, and I'm noticing you that it exists, and here it is, and then they would send it to the sheriff and the city police and all the agents in the town, county, and state. Because a lot of times, the agents or police would testify in court, well, we didn't know we violated his rights. So people would start writing notices about the Fourth Amendment or the Ninth Amendment or whatever pertains to you in that arena. And there's nothing magical about a notice. It's just simply, you see legal notices in the paper all the time. This is your legal notice to them. You're sending it to them. And how effective it is, I don't know, but sometimes people just stay away from you. You're not bothered as much maybe or stuff like that. But a form is only a form. The only thing that makes it work is your signature. Like most people have done 1040 forms, you sign that form, to the IRS, and you want to make sure it's all right. The only thing that makes that form valid is your signature under penalties of perjury. But you can literally do your taxes on a brown grocery sack and orange crayon and send it to the IRS. As long as it's signed under penalties of perjury, it's good. They won't like it, but they'll accept it. But that signature under perjury is the only thing that matters. You can do it on notebook paper. You can do it on this file folder. But it's only as good as the person behind it. Anything you sign. The Declaration is a wonderful instrument, the Declaration of Independence. But it's nothing without the commitment of those guys who signed it. That's what made it go. They followed through. They made it work. And that's what we have to learn to do too. Take a little action and you follow through and you start changing things a little bit by a little bit. Until after 10 years, people just kind of stay away from you. You don't get asked questions like the other guy does. They don't want to talk to you or stuff like that. And you're always chasing them. Hey, I want to talk to you. And they run away. So that's the place to be in. I'm going to pass these around. These are different property use agreements. And if you want to look at these, they're put out by an organization, landandwaterusa.com, by Ronnie Bell Sylvester and her husband. It's Land and Water USA. And they have these forms. If you own land, if you're a rancher, and you got people who are snooping around your land, you can make them agree to pay to be on there. Just another contract, but you got to be willing to write it up and enforce it on them. Now here's a good strategy on trespass. I've got some examples of trespass signs in this folder here. And I'll pass that around. But if you're going to put a no trespassing sign on your yard, put on something that says something. Don't just buy those little teeny ones that say no trespassing. Get something that's got some teeth on it. I borrowed this. This was on my bedroom, on my daughter's bedroom door, so I brought that.
I wonder why.
You can look at that. And there'll be examples in here. I'll pass this around, but get one that says something. Not just say no trespassing, but if you trespass, it's going to cost you money. But this guy here had a great little strategy. I copied it off here. There's a way to stop the political. There's a way to stop the. You have to have your property posted. Say you have a $5,000 fine on your trespassing sign. This guy is saying, bill the trespassers in writing that they owe you the fee that is on the sign. Tell them you will lower the fee to what the small claims court will allow. That could be $1,500. I think in here it's $2,500. Let them know that if they ignore this, you'll file a claim in the small claims court, and they cannot have an attorney with them in this court. Now, I've seen guys in small claims, and it's just you and your opponent talking to the judge. So that's a good tack, what this guy did there. I'm going to pass that around. You can look at the examples of the no trespassing signs and just that little detail. But you can have a fine on the sign, but just make a deal with the guy. I'll lower it to the small claims court fee. And I'll take you there if you don't pay.
Well, I saw some things as far as small claims court, like if you're fighting Chase Manhattan, file a claim against the small claims court. $2,500 limit, but they've got to appear, and they can't bring a lawyer, and you may recover a small amount of damage, or rather than going the big lawsuit route.
Sure. Here's another thing, maybe you got children or grandchildren that you don't want to get vaccinated. And people might pressure you to get them vaccinated. You can download these off the internet. This is a physician's warranty of vaccination safety. And you take it to your doctor, and you want him to assure you that this vaccine is safe and that he'll sign that it's safe. And he's liable for any damages to your child later on. You'll never get it signed or filled out. And you can bring it to the school district and say, I can't find a doctor who will sign this and fill it out and stand behind it. So, you got to take offense. You got to go on the offensive. Put them on the defensive. Give them the paperwork and tell them, look, the doctor won't sign for the safety of these vaccinations. How can you make my child get a vaccination if I don't want one? Fourth Amendment comes in there again.
I notarized a form today for the school, so she didn't have to have her children vaccinated.
Uh-huh.
She had to have it notarized because she doesn't believe that this will be better.
Yeah, sure, you could use that. This is an example of a constructive notice, and again, the notice is only good as the man behind it. This is a Cliven Bundy's, Dr. Haynes.
Yes.
I copied his off. He's a rancher in Nevada, and you guys can look at that. You can take it home if you want, but it's just an example of a constructive notice. And there's nothing magic about it. It's just your commitment behind what you're writing. And that's what Great Grandpa knew. It's he made his own contracts. He made his own deals with people. And he knew that whatever he did, whatever he signed, it was only as good as he was. If he wasn't up to it, he didn't sign it. People understood themselves better. They were not trained to think in a different way. They knew who they were. They knew where they were from. They knew what they could do probably better than what we do. And so it's just a matter of retraining ourselves to think offensively. Am I out of time, Joe?
No.
Okay.
It's interesting. I forget exactly which story it was, but it was one of the, not the founding fathers, it was one of the people at the time that was trying to raise money for the war. And he went to some very well-off person, probably a millionaire, and he's asking wanted to borrow money, wanted the government to borrow the money. He said he would not loan the government money, but he would loan it to that individual. So I guess, his signature, his word, was as good as gold, and we were talking about some big bucks.
Yeah.
Financing a war on your own, that's some big money.
I just want to share this about tax assessors and trespassers and building inspectors. And the state of Michigan has some fairly good cases on this. And I'm just going to read a couple little quips out of these, out of this legal brief here. An assessor has no legal authority to enter upon private property to appraise its value. An assessor can only enter private property with express consent or implied consent. In summary, if the zoning administrator, building inspector, or assessor has no legal authority to enter private property in an official capacity, entry should only be made with express or implied consent. Now that's kind of tricky because they got in there in an official capacity, or if he has no legal authority. Now he might say he has legal authority. So these assessor trespasser cases kind of go both ways. Now here in Wyoming, a tax assessor generally will walk on your property and look around. We had one on ours, and my daughter tried to chase him off, and they said, well, we got authority to be here. We can be here. And the Wyoming Supreme Court will uphold that. Once it gets past the Wyoming Supreme Court down to 10th Circuit in Denver, it will probably die. But he would have to go about that far. But probably the Wyoming Supreme Court would uphold a tax assessor trespassing on your property. Doesn't mean you can't call the sheriff and make a little trouble for him. It doesn't mean you can't do a Public Records Act request on him for all what he's done in the past or a rights violation or anything like that. You can do that. But probably on a state level, in the end, the Supreme Court would probably uphold his ability to come on your property because the state does got to have the money. they're in business. And it probably wouldn't go your way till you went to the 10th Circuit in Denver with your case. But it doesn't stop you from asking questions about them or having a hearing about it and making some trouble, which I recommend.
That's on your property, not necessarily in your home.
Yeah, on your property, yeah. I'm just going to read a little bit here and I'm done here. Michigan jurisprudence has never recognized immunity on behalf of a city, village, township, county, or any administrative division therefrom from liability for trespass on private property, whether the trespass be of long or short duration. And you got a couple cases there. In the absence of either a properly issued administrative search warrant or a search warrant, otherwise, that's not quite right. Common law and constitutional principles of government or sovereign immunity have never permitted government agents to commit trespass in violation of property rights. And it has the case here, Little versus Barron's. Under the Federal Tort Claims Act, similarly, federal law enforcement officers who generally enjoy absolute immunity from tort liability may nonetheless be held liable for damages for the tort of trespass. So there is law out there for you, and you can cite those cases if you're having trouble with people trespass on your property, whether private organizations, federal officials, if the IRS is snooping around. There's no use cooperating. You might as well, show them the law and tell them that they need to leave or the sheriff will be here. And, how about any questions?
Is our sheriff useful at all in this?
What's that?
Is our sheriff useful at all in this respect?
Not at all.
Okay, yeah. That's what I thought.
But a constructive notice that also mentions Title 18 U.S. 2381, where he can be prosecuted under that federal statute for not upholding your constitutional rights, will tend to bring him around.
Yeah.
The fact that you can lien his property changes his mind, whether he likes you or not.
Yeah.
What are the numbers again?
Title 18 U.S. 2381.
And see, what most bureaucrats can't hardly believe is that they actually broke a law. They think they're immune. They can't imagine that they broke a law. They've been doing this for 20 years or 25 years and about to retire. And you bring up the fact, man, you've been breaking a law for 25 years. You've been violating people's rights, due process. You violated the Administrative Procedure Act every time you open your office or every time you enforced the stop work order. You've committed a lot of crimes. Maybe judgment day is here. But it doesn't work unless you're willing to lay it on them.
Now, from what I understand, there's some difference too when public officials have some immunity supposedly, and we had a case up in Cleveland where some of my friends want to take their kids out of school for religious holidays that are not observed by the mainstream in the country. And the school district decided to give zeros to all these kids for every day they were gone. They wouldn't let them take the homework and do it on the road and or make it up or anything. So some of these parents took them to court, and it seems as though, since it was a civil right that was being violated, these school board members were liable monetarily, and there's a $50,000 judgment against them. And they kind of changed their mind real quick, and the plaintiffs said, "Okay, we'll let this ride, but don't you ever try this again," because it was a civil right for religious freedom that was being violated. Does that sound?
Yes, that's right. First Amendment, in fact, Supreme Court case, Owens versus the City of Independence. And reading for the majority, the Supreme Court justice said to the City Council of Independence, Missouri. You are an officer of the law. You cannot claim ignorance of the law. It makes the law look stupid. If you, an officer of the law, doesn't know the law and you violate somebody's rights, a citizen on the street cannot claim ignorance of the law, and neither can you.
And what's that one called again?
Owens versus the City of Independence.
People say ignorance of the law is no excuse. I tell them ignorance of my rights is no excuse either.
That's
It
right.
won't be a defense. An officer who willfully and wantonly appoints an unfit and incompetent person for public duties may be liable for damage which approximately results therefrom. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff, and anybody who wants this collection of court cases or something, just let me know, and I can email them to you or copy them off for you. But there's good stuff in all this. You know, statutes that violate the plain and obvious principles of common right and common reason are null and void. Well, when's the last time a county attorney ever heard that? Or a state legislator, for crying out loud, you know?
Seems to me I read a Supreme Court decision. I don't know if it was a Mack case, but it was quoted in it. The Supreme Court decision said that any law that violates the Constitution is no law.
Yeah.
Marbury versus Madison. Yeah, that was the first very important case that established the Constitution as grand law of lands. Never been overturned.
The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. But it happens all the time.
Could you
Yeah,
say that
there's-
one again?
What's that?
Repeat that?
The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. But look at all the gun laws we have and all that. The privilege against self-incrimination is neither accorded to the passive resistant nor to the person who is ignorant of his rights, nor to one indifferent thereto. It is a fighting clause. Its benefits can be retained only by sustained combat. It cannot be claimed by attorney or solicitor. It is valid only when insisted upon a belligerent claimant in person. The judge is saying only you can claim your rights. Your attorney can't. Your solicitor can't. Only you can do it, and it calls you a belligerent claimant. So if you're ever in a situation, you can ask the judge, would it prejudice you if I uphold my rights as a belligerent claimant? Because this judge here says I should. These court cases bring up great arguments. Would you penalize me for being a belligerent claimant? Would you hold me in contempt for being a belligerent claimant of my rights? The courts have authorized you to be a belligerent claimant. They said, rights are not for mama's boys. They're only for belligerent claimants. So if you won't fight for them, you don't get them.
And don't fight with the little guy behind the desk. It's pointless. He doesn't know anything but what's in his little book that tells him
Yeah.
whatever he can do.
Yeah.
Go to the top,
Yeah.
his board of directors, and send them
Mhm.
letters, registered, signature. Things will start to happen.
But I'm just reading these things because the courts, these judges are telling you, get off your rears and get your country back. It's up to you. Don't depend on the tax assessor to give you your rights. Don't depend on the judge. Don't depend on your lawyer. You got to do it. And these courts tell you over and over again, only you can do it. I can't do it for you. I can't do any rights for Leslie. I can't uphold her. She has to do them for herself. She could be coached how to do it, but you can only do them yourself. The courts are telling you this is a nation of sovereign individuals, and this is how it works. It's the only way it can work. We don't have a king, we don't have subjects, but we have people and Americans, and this is the only way this works. We still know how it works. You guys need to listen up. You guys need to get with the program and study up a little bit. And, well, you guys want to hear anything else?
We're getting close to very good.